morning.
Don't touch that. Who are you?
Toitulo. Don't touch that, the billionaire shouted. You can't afford anything in here. The August heat in Phoenix rose off the asphalt in visible waves, turning the luxury car lot into a shimmering mirage of chrome and glass. Elara Montgomery stood in the air-conditioned showroom of Montgomery Luxury Motors, watching a young man approach the entrance with the wary eye of someone who'd built an empire by trusting her instincts. At 23, she'd learned that instinct was everything. The man was tall, maybe 6'1", with dark hair that needed cutting and work clothes that had seen better days. He moved with purpose toward her dealership, and something about the set of his shoulders made her tense. She'd seen too many desperate people try too many desperate things. When he pushed through the glass doors, the cool air hit him like a physical force. He paused just for a moment, and she saw his eyes close with what looked like relief. Then he spotted the water cooler near her desk. "Excuse me," he said, his voice surprisingly cultured for someone in a janitor's uniform. "Would it be possible to get some water? I've been walking for a while and—" But he never finished, because in crossing the showroom floor his hand had brushed against the hood of her pride and joy, a crimson Mercedes-AMG GT. So new the plastic still protected the seats. "Don't touch that." The words came out sharper than she'd intended, echoing off the glass walls. "You can't afford anything in here." The man froze. For a long moment he just looked at her, and Elara saw something flicker across his face. Not anger exactly, but something deeper and more unsettling. Recognition, maybe, or pity. "I wasn't trying to buy anything," he said quietly. "I was asking for water." Heat flooded Elara's cheeks, but she didn't back down. Couldn't. In this business, showing weakness was fatal. "The cooler's for customers only." "Right." He nodded slowly, still with that unnervingly calm expression. "Of course it is." He turned to leave, and Elara felt a strange twist in her stomach. She told herself it was indigestion from the protein shake she'd had for lunch, not guilt. Definitely not guilt. But at the door, he paused. "You know what's funny?" He didn't wait for her to answer. "That car you're so worried about? The paint job alone costs more than most people make in a year. But water, which literally falls from the sky, that's too precious to share." Then he was gone, back into the brutal Arizona heat. Elara stood very still for several minutes, staring at the door. Her sales manager, David, emerged from his office with raised eyebrows. "That seemed a bit harsh even for you," he said carefully. He was going to make a mess on the cars. "He asked for water, Elara." She turned away, irritated. "I don't pay you for commentary. Did the Johnsons call back about the S-Class?" David knew better than to push. He'd worked for her for 3 years, since she'd bought her first dealership at 20, and he understood that Elara Montgomery didn't apologize. Not to employees, not to competitors, and certainly not to some random janitor who'd wandered in off the street. But as the afternoon wore on, she found herself glancing at the door more than usual. The encounter had unsettled her in a way she couldn't quite name. It wasn't what he'd said, though his parting shot had landed more accurately than she'd admit. It was the look in his eyes, like he'd seen right through her carefully constructed armor to something underneath, something lonely. She shook off the thought. Elara Montgomery didn't do lonely. She had a schedule that would make most CEOs weep. A social calendar filled with charity galas and business dinners, and enough money to buy any company that interested her. She'd built Montgomery Luxury Motors from nothing. Well, from the insurance money after her husband's death 2 years ago. But that was nobody's business. And at 23, she owned 17 dealerships across 3 states. People didn't pity her. They envied her. By 6 o'clock, when David left for the day, Elara was alone in the showroom. She preferred it this way, actually. The silence felt more honest than the forced cheerfulness her sales team projected. Here, surrounded by machines that cost more than houses, she could breathe. Her phone buzzed. Another text from her mother. "Darling, the Hendersons want to know if you're bringing anyone to their anniversary party." I told them you're far too busy for such nonsense, but you know how they gossip. Alara deleted it without responding. Her mother meant well in her own suffocating way, but lately every conversation circled back to the same thing. When was Alara going to move on and find someone new? As if Marcus had been a pair of shoes she'd outgrown. She walked over to the Mercedes, the one the janitor had touched, the one she'd snapped at him about. Running her hand over the hood, the same spot where his fingers had been, she noticed there was no smudge, no mark at all. He'd barely grazed it. Idiot, she muttered, though whether she meant him or herself she wasn't entirely sure. The next morning brought a crisis that drove all thoughts of random encounters from her mind. Her Scottsdale location had sold a limited edition Porsche to a client who'd bounced the check. When David called with the news, Alara was already in her Maserati, heading toward the dealership with the kind of cold fury that made her employees nervous. "Tell me you didn't deliver the car." "We delivered the car." David sounded miserable. The check seemed legitimate. He had all the right documentation. "Run the paperwork again. Find out where he lives." "And David?" She took a breath, forcing her voice to stay level. "This comes out of your bonus." She ended the call before he could respond. It was harsh, maybe, but this was business. You showed weakness, people took advantage. Her father had taught her that before he'd drunk himself into an early grave, and Marcus had reinforced it with every soft business deal that had nearly bankrupted them before the accident. The accident. Even 2 years later, she couldn't think of it as anything else. Couldn't think about the icy road, the semi-truck, the phone call from the hospital that had come 3 hours too late. Marcus had been driving back from a failed negotiation, angry and distracted, and the last words they'd exchanged had been about money. Always money. Alara pulled into the dealership's back lot, parking in her reserved spot. The building was glass and steel, all sharp angles and expensive landscaping. Her temple to success. Her proof that she'd moved beyond the scared girl who'd married at 19 because she thought love mattered more than sense. Love was a luxury she could no longer afford. Inside, chaos reigned. 2 of her sales associates were arguing over a commission split, a customer was complaining about a scratch on his new BMW, and the receptionist looked on the verge of tears. Alara strode through it all like Moses parting the Red Sea, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "Conference room. Now," she told David, not breaking stride. For the next 3 hours they worked through the disaster. The client with the bounced check had given a false address and disconnected his phone. The Porsche had GPS tracking, thank God, and they located it at a luxury apartment complex in Tempe. Alara made calls to her lawyer, to the police, to the apartment complex's management, and by 2 in the afternoon they had the car back. But the experience left her rattled in a way she didn't like to admit. She'd built her empire on being smarter than everyone else, on seeing the angles before they developed. How had she missed this? "It happens," David said gently, reading her expression. "Even to the best of us. I'm not paying you for platitudes either." But she didn't snap at him the way she normally would have. The fight had gone out of her somewhere between the police station and the recovery lot. She felt tired in a bone-deep way that had nothing to do with the long hours. That evening, Alara stayed late at the office above the showroom. Her office was really a luxury apartment she'd built into the second floor of her flagship dealership, a bedroom, bathroom, and living space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lot. She told people it was for convenience, for those nights when deals ran late or morning meetings started early. The truth was simpler and more pathetic. She didn't like going home to her actual house, the one she'd shared with Marcus. Too many ghosts, too many empty rooms. Around 11, she heard the distinctive beep of the security system downstairs. She tensed for a moment, then relaxed. Tuesday, cleaning crew night. Alara had learned to time her late nights around the cleaning schedule. She liked the building when it was quiet, liked watching the crew work through the windows of her office. There was something hypnotic about their efficiency, the way they moved through space with purpose. She poured herself a glass of wine, her second if she was being honest, and settled onto the leather couch to answer emails. The soft sounds of vacuum cleaners and buffer machines drifted up from below, oddly comforting in their predictability. Then she heard voices. Frowning, Alara moved to the window that overlooked the showroom. Two figures moved between the cars, and even from this height, she recognized the cleaning service's distinctive blue uniforms. One was Maria, the middle-aged woman who'd been cleaning her dealerships for years. The other was a man, tall and dark-haired, and something about the way he moved made her breath catch. It couldn't be, but it was. The janitor from yesterday, the one she'd refused water to, the one who'd looked at her with those unsettling eyes and seen too much. He was cleaning her building. Alara watched him work, unable to look away. He moved with the same quiet efficiency as Maria. No wasted motion, no complaint. When he passed near the red Mercedes, her Mercedes, he paused for just a moment, his hand hovering over the hood. Then he smiled, shook his head, and moved on. That smile did something strange to her chest. She told herself to step back from the window, to return to her emails and let the man work in peace. Instead, she found herself reaching for her phone and calling down to the security desk. "Yes, Ms. Montgomery?" The night guard sounded surprised. She rarely bothered with him. "The cleaning crew tonight. I see there's someone new." "That's Ethan, ma'am. Started about 3 weeks ago. Maria's nephew, I think. Good worker." Alara hung up before he could finish. Ethan. The janitor had a name now, which somehow made everything worse. She watched him for another 20 minutes, hating herself for it, hating the way her pulse jumped when he looked up briefly toward her window. He couldn't possibly see her with the lights off in her office and the showroom's brightness below, but for a moment their eyes seemed to meet. Then he returned to his work, and Alara forced herself back to her desk. But sleep didn't come easy that night, and when it did, she dreamed of red Mercedes and men with kind eyes who saw through all her carefully constructed walls. The next few weeks fell into an uncomfortable pattern. Alara found herself staying late on Tuesday and Thursday nights, cleaning nights, telling herself it was just the natural rhythm of her work schedule. She didn't watch Ethan work, barely noticed him really, except that was a lie, and she'd never been good at lying to herself. She noticed everything. The way he treated the cars with respect even though he was just cleaning them. The way he and Maria laughed together, their voices carrying up to her window. The way he always paused at the red Mercedes, that small smile playing at his lips. And she noticed, though it took her longer than it should have, that he never drank from the water cooler. On a Thursday in mid-September, Alara broke her own unspoken rule. She left her office and went downstairs, telling herself she needed to check on something in the showroom. What exactly she hadn't decided. Ethan was buffing the floor near her desk when she appeared. He looked up, clearly surprised, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "Working late again, Ms. Montgomery?" he said finally. His tone was perfectly polite, with no trace of sarcasm, but somehow she felt mocked anyway. Someone has to keep this business running. She paused, then added stiffly, "You can use the water cooler if you need to." Something flickered across his face. Amusement, maybe, or disappointment. "That's generous of you. Don't make a habit of it. Wouldn't dream of it." He returned to his work, dismissing her, and Alara found herself rooted to the spot like an idiot. She should leave. She should go back upstairs and forget this entire interaction. Instead, she heard herself saying, "You're Maria's nephew?" "Cousin, actually. She helped me get the job when I needed one. And you needed one because..." Now he did look at her, really look at her, and she saw the flash of something deeper in his eyes. "Because life doesn't always go according to plan, Ms. Montgomery. Even for those of us who touch expensive cars without permission." The reference to their first meeting hung in the air between them. Alara felt her cheeks heat, but she didn't look away. "That was..." She paused, struggling with words that didn't come naturally. "I may have overreacted." May have? Did overreact. There we go. His smile was small but genuine. That wasn't so hard, was it? It had been excruciating, actually, but Alara wasn't about to admit that. Instead, she changed the subject. "You don't sound like a janitor, and you don't sound like someone who'd apologize. I guess we're both full of surprises." Despite herself, Alara almost smiled. There was something refreshing about someone who didn't treat her with either fear or false flattery. What did you do before this? I taught philosophy at Phoenix College. Before life decided to give me a different education. Philosophy. That explained the way he spoke. The calm intelligence in his eyes. What happened? The same thing that happens to a lot of people. Circumstances changed. Priorities shifted. He straightened, meeting her gaze levelly. I have a daughter, 5 years old. When her mother decided she wanted a different life, one that didn't include either of us, I needed a job with flexible hours. Maria offered me one. So here I am. The simple honesty of it hit Alara harder than she'd expected. She'd built an empire on ruthlessness and determination, on never showing weakness. And here was this man, cleaning floors for minimum wage, talking about his failures like they were just facts. Not shameful, not devastating, just true. I'm sorry, she said, and meant it. Don't be. I have my daughter 3 nights a week. I have work that keeps us fed, and I have Maria, who's basically a saint. He paused. Besides, there's dignity in all work, even cleaning. Maybe especially cleaning. You really believe that? I have to. The alternative is pretty depressing. They stood there in the artificial light of the showroom, surrounded by machines worth more than most people's homes, and for a moment, Alara felt the vast distance between their worlds collapse into something smaller, something almost human. I should let you work, she said finally. Probably, but neither of them moved. Ms. Montgomery? Maria's voice broke the spell. We're finished in the offices. Should we do the lot tonight or wait until next week? Next week is fine, Maria. Thank you. The older woman smiled at Alara, then at Ethan, with the knowing expression of someone who'd seen too much of life to be surprised by anything. Come on, mijo. Let's finish up and get you home to that baby girl. As they gathered their supplies, Alara forced herself to return to her office. But at the door, she paused. Ethan? He looked up. The water cooler. It's always available, for anyone who needs it. This time his smile reached his eyes. Thank you, Ms. Montgomery. Alara, she heard herself say. When it's just us, you can call me Alara. She didn't wait for his response, didn't trust herself to. Instead, she climbed the stairs to her office and poured herself another glass of wine, her hands not quite steady. What the hell was she doing? October brought cooler temperatures to Phoenix and a new complication to Alara's life. Her mother was getting married again. The 3rd time, if anyone was counting, which Alara tried very hard not to do. You'll be there, of course, her mother announced over brunch at the Phoenician. And please, darling, try to look happy about it. Gerald's family is very traditional. Gerald was 68, a retired investment banker with more money than sense, and a habit of calling Alara sweetheart that made her want to throw things. But her mother loved him, or said she did, and Alara had learned long ago that arguing was pointless. I'll be there, she said, but I'm not giving a speech. Fine, just try to smile occasionally. You've been so serious lately. Serious. That was her mother's word for any emotion that wasn't relentlessly cheerful. Alara had been serious since Marcus died. Serious since she'd started building her business empire. Serious since she'd realized that sentiment was a luxury she couldn't afford. But lately, that seriousness felt more like a cage than armor. She started staying late more often, not just on cleaning nights. Started finding excuses to be in the showroom when Ethan was working. They didn't always talk. Sometimes she just watched him from her office window, trying to understand what it was about this man that unsettled her so thoroughly. When they did talk, the conversations were brief but surprisingly substantial. He told her about his daughter Lily, who loved dinosaurs and refused to wear anything that wasn't purple. She found herself mentioning Marcus just once, and the way Ethan simply nodded, no pity, no awkward condolences, made something tight in her chest loosen. You were young, he said. What were you, 21 when he died? 21 when he died. 19 when we got married. That's brave or stupid, and I genuinely can't tell which. Why not both? He laughed, and the sound did things to her that expensive wine and successful business deals never quite managed, but she couldn't let herself think about what that meant. couldn't let herself acknowledge the way her pulse quickened when he walked into the showroom, or the way she'd started scheduling her late nights around his cleaning schedule. That way lay disaster. That way lay vulnerability. And Alara Montgomery had learned the hard way that vulnerability was just another word for weakness. In early November, everything changed. Alara was working in her office on a Tuesday night reviewing acquisition papers for a potential new dealership in Sedona when she heard a crash from the showroom below. Not the gentle sounds of cleaning, but something violent and urgent. She was down the stairs in seconds, her heart pounding. Ethan was on the floor near the Mercedes, one hand pressed to his chest, his face pale and sweating. Maria knelt beside him, phone in hand, her voice sharp with panic as she spoke to the 911 operator. "What happened?" Alara demanded, dropping to her knees beside them. "I don't know, he just collapsed. One minute he was fine, the next..." Maria's voice broke. "They're sending an ambulance." Alara looked at Ethan, really looked at him, and saw the gray tinge to his lips, the way his breathing came in short, desperate gasps. This wasn't just exhaustion or dehydration. This was serious. "Stay with me," she said, taking his other hand without thinking. "Help is coming. Just stay with me." His eyes found hers, dark with pain and something else. Fear, maybe, or resignation. "Lily," he managed to say, "if something happens, nothing's going to happen. If it does, she's with her grandmother, Clara Davis. Promise me." "I promise. But you're going to be fine. You hear me? You're going to be fine." She held his hand while they waited for the ambulance, feeling the rapid flutter of his pulse against her palm. Maria prayed in Spanish, her voice a constant murmur of desperation and faith. When the paramedics arrived, they moved with efficient calm, asking questions Alara couldn't answer. Did he have a history of heart problems? Was he on any medications? Did he have any allergies? "I don't know," she kept saying, hating how useless the words sounded. "I don't know." They loaded him onto a stretcher, and as they wheeled him toward the door, his hand reached out, grasping for hers. Alara took it without hesitation. "Come with me," he said. Not a question, a plea. She should have said no, should have let Maria go, should have stayed here where she was safe and in control. Instead, she heard herself saying, "Of course, I'm right here." The ambulance ride was a blur of lights and sirens and medical jargon she didn't understand. Alara sat in the small space near Ethan's head, her hand still holding his, while the paramedics worked with practiced efficiency. At the hospital, they were separated immediately. Alara stood in the harsh fluorescent light of the emergency room waiting area, suddenly aware that she was still in her work clothes, that her hand hurt from gripping his so tightly, that she had no idea what she was doing here. Maria arrived 20 minutes later, breathless and terrified. "How is he?" "I don't know. They won't tell me anything. I'm not family." The older woman nodded, then surprised Alara by pulling her into a fierce hug. "Thank you for coming with him, for being there. I didn't do anything. You were there. That's everything." They waited together. Two women with nothing in common except their concern for a man who cleaned floors for a living. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. Finally, a doctor emerged, looking tired but not devastated. "He's stable," she said. "It was a cardiac event, but we caught it in time. He'll need surgery, bypass most likely, but he should make a full recovery." The relief hit Alara like a physical blow. Her knees went weak and Maria had to steady her. "Can we see him?" Maria asked. "Family only right now, are you?" "I'm his cousin, this is." Maria hesitated, glancing at Alara. "His employer," Alara finished. "I'll wait here." But when Maria returned from visiting Ethan, she had a message. "He wants to see you." Alara's heart did something complicated and unwelcome. "Me?" He was very specific. Said he needs to talk to you about Lily. Right, his daughter. That was all this was. A practical conversation about childcare while he recovered. She followed Maria to the room, her heels clicking too loudly on the hospital floor. Ethan looked small in the bed, diminished by the machines and tubes, but his eyes were clear when she entered. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey yourself." She tried for light and missed. "You scared the hell out of us." Sorry about that. It wasn't exactly planned. I should hope not. They smiled at each other, and something passed between them that Ilara didn't want to name. Thank you, Ethan said, for coming with me, for staying. It wasn't a big deal. It was to me. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Ilara felt the walls she'd so carefully constructed start to crack, and panic rose in her throat. You wanted to talk about Lily, she said, needing to return to safer ground. Right. Yes. He grimaced, whether from pain or frustration she couldn't tell. Her grandmother can't take care of her full-time. She's 76 and has her own health issues. And I'm going to be out of commission for a while. What about her mother? Hasn't been in the picture for 3 years. Last I heard, she was somewhere in California with her new boyfriend. Ilara felt a flash of anger so intense it surprised her. What kind of woman abandoned her child? I'll take care of the surgery costs, she found herself saying. And you'll keep getting paid while you recover, full salary. Ethan shook his head. I can't accept that. Then call it an advance. You can pay me back over time. Ilara, let me do this. The words came out more intense than she'd intended. Please, let me do this one thing that actually matters. He studied her face for a long moment, and Ilara had the unsettling feeling he could see right through her again. See the lonely girl underneath the corporate armor. See the woman who'd spent 2 years building walls and was terrified of what might happen if they came down. Okay, he said finally. Thank you. She nodded, not trusting her voice. There's one more thing. He hesitated. Lily, she's going to be confused and scared, would you? Could you maybe check on her? Just until I can get things sorted out? This was different. This wasn't writing a check or making a phone call. This was getting involved in a way that couldn't be undone. I don't know anything about kids, Ilara said. Neither did I before I had one. You'll figure it out. That's a lot of faith to put in someone who yelled at you for touching a car. You also held my hand in an ambulance. I'm choosing to focus on that. Despite everything, the hospital, the fear, the way her world was tilting on its axis, Ilara smiled. When you put it that way, is that a yes? She should say no. Should walk away now before this became something she couldn't control. But when she looked at Ethan, at the hope and vulnerability in his eyes, she found herself nodding. It's a yes. His relief was visible. Thank you. God, Ilara, thank you. She stayed with him until the nurses kicked her out, making calls and arrangements that should have felt like a burden, but somehow didn't. Maria gave her Clara's address, and the next morning, Ilara found herself driving to a modest house in Tempe, her stomach in knots. A small woman with silver hair answered the door, her eyes red from crying. You must be Ilara, Maria called. Come in, please. The house was cluttered but clean, filled with the kind of comfortable chaos that came from actually living in a space rather than just occupying it. Photographs covered every surface, and Ilara recognized Ethan in many of them. Younger, happier, holding a baby who must be Lily. She's in the backyard, Clara said. I told her Daddy was sick but would be okay. I don't think she really understands. Ilara followed her through the house, her heart pounding. She'd negotiated million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but the thought of talking to a 5-year-old terrified her. Lily was sitting under a tree, arranging plastic dinosaurs in some elaborate scenario only she understood. She looked up when Ilara approached, her eyes, Ethan's eyes, solemn and assessing. Who are you? She asked with the bluntness of the very young. I'm Ilara. I'm a friend of your dad's. Is Daddy okay? He's going to be fine, but he has to stay in the hospital for a little while. Lily's lower lip trembled. I want to see him. You will. Soon. But right now he needs to rest. The girl considered this, then returned her attention to her dinosaurs. This is a Tyrannosaurus, she said, holding up a plastic figure. They were apex predators. That means they were the best hunters. I know, Ilara said, sitting down carefully on the grass beside her. They were pretty impressive. Do you like dinosaurs? I've never really thought about it. Lily looked at her with something like pity. That's sad. And somehow, sitting there in a stranger's backyard, listening to a 5-year-old explain the difference between a velociraptor and a Deinonychus, Ilara felt something inside her chest crack open just a little bit more. Over the next week, Ilara visited Lily every day. She brought books about dinosaurs, art supplies, a purple dress that made the little girl's face light up. She sat through endless games of imagination, playing roles she didn't understand in scenarios that made no logical sense. And somewhere in all of it, she started to understand what Ethan had been trying to tell her that first night in the showroom, about dignity, about what really mattered, about the difference between price and value. The surgery was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Ilara took the day off, something she never did, and spent it in the hospital waiting room with Maria and Clara. When the doctor finally emerged to say it had gone well, that Ethan would make a full recovery, the relief was so intense it left her shaking. She visited him that evening, finding him groggy but awake. "How's Lily?" were his first words. "She's fine. She made you a card. Something about dinosaurs taking care of you." He smiled, that real smile that did complicated things to her pulse. "Sounds about right. She's something special, your daughter." "Yeah, she is." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Ilara realized with some surprise that she didn't feel the need to fill it with chatter. This was enough. Just being here, together, was enough. "I owe you everything," Ethan said finally. "You don't owe me anything. I'm serious, Ilara. What you've done, not just the money but with Lily being there, I can never repay that." "Then don't try." She met his eyes. "Just get better. That's payment enough." Something shifted between them in that moment. Something that had been building since that first afternoon when he'd asked for water, and she'd said no. Since the nights watching him work. Since the ambulance ride when she'd held his hand and promised everything would be okay. "Ilara," he said softly, "what are we doing here?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But I think I want to find out." He reached for her hand and she let him take it. Let herself feel the warmth of his skin, the steady beat of his pulse. Let herself imagine just for a moment what it might be like to let someone in, to let herself be vulnerable, to let herself be human. But even as the thought formed, fear rose up to meet it, because she'd been vulnerable once before with Marcus, and look how that had ended. Look at what love had cost her. Could she really risk it again? Did she even have a choice? The questions followed her home that night, circling through her mind as she drove through the Phoenix darkness. And when she finally fell asleep in her too-big house, she dreamed not of red Mercedes or corporate empires, but of a man with kind eyes and a little girl who loved dinosaurs. She dreamed of possibility. November slipped into December, and with it came changes Ilara hadn't anticipated. Ethan returned to work on light duty, his recovery progressing well but not yet complete. She'd find him in the showroom sometimes during off hours, not cleaning, but just sitting, looking at the cars with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Penny for your thoughts," she said one evening, surprising both of them with the casual intimacy of it. "Just thinking about value," he said. "What makes something worth what it costs? And I'm not sure anyone knows. Not really." It was the kind of conversation they'd been having more and more. Philosophical, probing, the kind that left Ilara thinking long after they'd parted ways. And with each conversation, she felt the distance between them shrinking, the walls she'd built starting to crumble. It scared her, but it also made her feel more alive than she had in years. The breaking point came 2 weeks before Christmas, at her mother's wedding. Ilara had brought Lily as her +1, a decision that had raised her mother's eyebrows so high they'd nearly disappeared into her hairline, and spent the entire reception watching the little girl charm everyone she met. "She's delightful," Gerald said, in one of his rare moments of actual sincerity. "Reminds me of my granddaughter." "She's pretty special," Ilara agreed, surprising herself with the pride in her voice. Later, dancing with Lily to some syrupy love song, Ilara felt something inside her finally surrender. She'd been fighting this for months, fighting the pull toward Ethan, fighting the growing love she felt for his daughter, fighting her own desperate loneliness. But maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to fight anymore. That night after returning Lily to Clara's house, Alara drove to the hospital where Ethan was doing his final post-op check. She found him in the parking lot, leaning against his beat-up Honda and looking at his phone. "Hey," she said. He looked up, smiled. "Hey, yourself. How was the wedding?" "Ridiculous expensive. Your daughter stole the show." "Sounds like her." They stood there in the cold December air, and Alara felt the words rising in her throat, the confession she'd been holding back, the truth she could no longer deny. "Ethan, But before she could finish, his phone rang. He glanced at it and his expression changed, darkened. "I have to take this," he said. "I'm sorry." She watched him walk away, phone pressed to his ear, and felt the moment slip away. But as she drove home that night, she knew with absolute certainty that she couldn't keep running, couldn't keep hiding, couldn't keep pretending that Ethan Davis was just her employee, just some man who cleaned her buildings. He was so much more than that. And tomorrow, she was going to tell him. Tomorrow, she was going to take the biggest risk of her life. Tomorrow, everything would change. She just didn't realize how much. The call changed everything, though not in the way Alara had imagined. She learned about it the next morning when Ethan appeared at her dealership, his face pale but determined. The comfortable distance they'd maintained, employer and employee, friend and friend, evaporated the moment he walked through the door. "We need to talk," he said. Alara's stomach dropped. Those 4 words never preceded anything good. "Of course, my office?" They climbed the stairs in silence, and once inside, Ethan closed the door carefully behind them. For a long moment he just stood there, looking at her with an expression that made her chest tight. "That call last night," he began. "It was from a law firm in Boston, a very prestigious law firm." "Okay. My father died 6 months ago. I didn't know. We'd been estranged for years. But apparently he left me something. A lot of things, actually." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Turns out my father was Richard Davis, the hedge fund manager. You've probably heard of him." Alara felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Richard Davis. Everyone in the financial world knew that name. Billionaire, philanthropist, one of the most powerful men in America before his death. "You're Richard Davis's son," she said slowly. "I am, though I spent most of my adult life trying to forget that fact." He ran a hand through his hair. "My father and I had philosophical differences about money, about what matters, about how to live a meaningful life. So I walked away from all of it, changed my last name, got my teaching degree, built a life that was mine. And now he's dead and I'm his sole heir. The lawyers have been searching for me for months. The call last night was them finally tracking me down." He met her eyes. "I'm worth approximately $3.7 billion, Alara. As of yesterday, I became one of the wealthiest men in Arizona." The irony was so perfect it almost hurt. All this time she'd been the rich one, the powerful one, the one with something to offer. And now, "Why are you telling me this?" she asked quietly. "Because I need you to understand something. When I walked into your dealership asking for water, when I took that cleaning job, when I held your hand in the hospital, none of that had anything to do with money. None of it was about what you could give me or what I could take from you. I know that. Do you?" He stepped closer. "Because I've seen how this world works, Alara. How people change when they know what you're worth. How relationships become transactions. How love becomes leverage. Is that what you think I'd do? No, God, no. But I needed you to hear it from me, before you heard it from anyone else. Before the media gets hold of it and turns us into some kind of fairy tale." His voice softened. "Because that's not what this is. That's not what we are." Alara felt tears prick her eyes, though she couldn't have said if they were from relief or grief or something more complicated. "What are we, Ethan?" "I don't know, but I'd like to find out, if you're willing." The vulnerability in his voice undid her. This man who'd just inherited billions, who could have anything he wanted, was standing in her office asking permission to be in her life. "I'm willing," she whispered. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, cupping her face in his hands. "I need you to understand something else. This money, It changes logistics, but it doesn't change who I am. I'm still Lily's father. Still the guy who cleaned your floors. Still the man who thinks you're the most fascinating, infuriating, incredible person he's ever met. You think I'm infuriating? Absolutely, it's one of your best qualities. She laughed, and then she was crying. And then he was kissing her, and none of it made logical sense, but all of it felt right. Felt like something she'd been running from her entire life. Felt like home. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. So what happens now? Now we figure it out, Alara said. Together. Together. I like the sound of that. Me too. The next few months were chaos. The media discovered Ethan's identity and went wild. Headlines screamed about the billionaire janitor and the Cinderella CEO. Photographers camped outside her dealerships. Her business partners questioned her judgment. Her mother called daily with increasingly hysterical warnings about gold diggers and fortune hunters. But through it all, Ethan remained steady. He set up trust funds for Lily, established charitable foundations in his father's name, and quietly refused every interview request. He kept showing up at her dealership, not to clean, but just to be there, to remind her that underneath all the noise, they were still just two people trying to build something real. And slowly, painfully, Alara learned to let herself be vulnerable, to let herself need someone, to let herself love without armor. It wasn't easy. There were fights about privacy and public perception. There were moments when old fears resurfaced and she pushed him away. There were nights when she lay awake, terrified that this happiness was temporary, that loss was inevitable. But there were also mornings waking up next to him. There were Sunday afternoons with Lily, teaching her to appreciate both dinosaurs and luxury cars. There were quiet conversations about purpose and legacy, and what it meant to build a life that mattered. 6 months after that conversation in her office, Ethan proposed, not with a massive diamond or an elaborate production, but with a simple question asked over breakfast while Lily was building a fort out of couch cushions in the next room. "Marry me," he said, "not because of money or status or what anyone else thinks. Marry me because I love you, because Lily loves you, because we want to build a life together." Alara looked at him. This man who'd walked into her life asking for water and somehow given her everything she'd been missing, and found herself smiling through tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, yes, yes." They married in a small ceremony 6 months later, with Lily as flower girl and Maria as maid of honor. It wasn't the society wedding her mother had wanted or the media spectacle everyone expected. It was just them, surrounded by the people who mattered, promising to show up for each other even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. And if sometimes Alara still caught herself marveling at the journey, from that first heated encounter to this profound partnership, she kept it to herself. Some things were too precious for words. Some things were just worth holding on to. Years later, standing in the showroom of her flagship dealership, now expanded to include affordable vehicles alongside the luxury ones, Alara would watch her stepdaughter explain the difference between various car models to fascinated customers and feel grateful for every twist and turn that had brought her here, to this life, this love, this complicated, messy, beautiful reality. The red Mercedes still sat in the showroom, carefully preserved, a reminder of where they'd started, of pride, meeting dignity, of two people learning that the most valuable things in life can't be bought or sold. They can only be chosen, and every day Alara chose this, chose him, chose them. It was, she thought, the best decision she'd ever made.